Hi guys, welcome to Body Successful. I'm Dr. K. All right, pause right here for a moment and give me a thumbs up if you think that the following statement is correct. Eating 1,500 calories a day over a span of a full day, spaced out maybe over 8 meals, is the same as eating 1,500 calories a day, well spaced out over just 2 meals, for example. All right, put that away because we're gonna come back to it at the end. All right, let's see how things work. You put food into your mouth, you eat. The food energy gets broken down into sugar and released into the blood, ready to be used for energy. Now, but the body is really sensitive. The blood's really sensitive to sugar levels. So it likes to keep it in a very delicate range. And it does that by utilizing a hormone called insulin. Now, insulin is it's a vital hormone really for our body, and it's necessary for our survival, and gets a really bad rap because we're managing it incorrectly. But the truth is, without it, we couldn't live. So the sole purpose of insulin is to grab the available sugar from the blood and transport it and open up different doors and put it in wherever the body is requiring it momentarily. So the hierarchy looks like this. When you eat and sugar is available, insulin comes in from the pancreas and grabs the sugar and puts it into immediate energy needs of cells. Now, if there's anything left over, suppose you ate a huge meal, then that food or that excess energy is going to be transported into short-term storage. Your short-term storage occurs in your liver and your muscles in the form of glycogen. Suppose you still have some left over, it was a huge meal. And so all that, tertiary, is going to go in your long-term storage, which is in form of fat in your fat cells. So the hierarchy is always like this. Immediate energy requirement in cells, short-term storage in liver and muscle in form of glycogen, and a long-term storage in form of fat in your fat cells. Okay, so suppose you don't eat for a few hours and then you have another meal. And when I say a meal for the purposes of today's video, I'm going to mean anything that you put in your mouth that gives you an insulin spike, that elicits an insulin spike. So suppose your friend goes and does a Starbucks run for you, and you get one of those big fruity loaded drinks, or loaded coffees, right, with sugar and whipped cream and fat and all that. So depending on what you did in this period, in this 2-3 hour period of time, it'll make a difference in what the response is going to be. Suppose you had exercise, or we went for a jog for 30 minutes. Well, chances are you utilized some of the glycogen up in your muscles. So there is an empty pocket in there in your short-term storage that needs to be filled. So hierarchy again. You brought in all this excess energy. It'll go to immediate energy stores if it's required, immediate energy requirement in the cells. Now, of course, there's a gap in your short-term storage because you went for a 30-minute jog. So you're going to put most of that energy into your muscles in form of glycogen. If there's still some remaining because you got a big venti one, then it's going to go straight into your fat cells. Now, suppose you didn't go for a jog for 30 minutes. What you did instead is you sat at your desk for 2-3 hours. Now, of course, you didn't really expend much. So chances are the short-term storage is pretty full still. It's pretty saturated. So majority of the energy that you brought in is going to be transported into your fat cells, into your long-term storage, because nothing else is necessary. Okay, so it's a pretty bulletproof system, right? Suppose, on the other hand, you don't eat. 2-3 hours go by after your first meal and you don't eat. Are you going to perish? Of course not. Because our body has a system that utilizes different forms of energy at different times. In other words, when you're not eating, then the short-term storage kicks in. And that's what it's there for the periods of time when food is not coming in. So now the body is starting to utilize glycogen from your liver and your muscles eventually in order to satisfy its energy needs. Now, say another, 5 hours go by, you skip another meal. Are you going to die? Of course not. Because you think about it, you go to bed at night and some of you sleep 12 hours, for example, overnight. Do you die? Of course not. And the reason for that is because our system, our body, is now utilizing other forms of energy. So when you depleted your short-term energy stores, which are pretty limited, okay, your glycogen from your muscles and your liver, then you're going to start tapping into your long-term storage. You're going to unlock the fat cells and release fat for energy. So it's a pretty simple and pretty effective system. Now, we all understand that when we eat, insulin gets released, and the sole purpose of insulin, the role of insulin, is to shuttle all this sugar into different parts of the body wherever it's needed, unlock those doors and put the sugar in there for energy and storage and so on. So when insulin is present, it pushes the body into a storing state. When insulin is present, insulin creates tells the body to store. Now, you have to understand something. At any given time, this is never a two-way street, okay? You cannot store and burn at the same time. You're either in a storing mode or you're in a burning mode, okay? So when insulin is present, insulin is king. It's a powerful little hormone that tells the body to store. As much as you put in and as much as it's available is going to go either in short-term storage, long-term storage, or immediate use. Okay, so when insulin is present, Insulin pushes the body in a storing mode. When insulin is not there because you're not eating for a significant period of time, insulin drops, then it can push the body into a fat burning mode. Okay, so that's pretty simple. So we understand that we have the short-term storage in your liver and your muscles in form of glycogen long-term, which is very easily accessible, by the way, but it's limited. There's not a whole lot of it. And then we have our long-term storage, which is really plentiful. Even if you're pretty slender, it's plentiful. But it is extremely difficult to unlock the cells to mobilize the fat for energy. Now imagine what you're eating 8 times a day. So what do you suppose happens for 8 times a day? And again, I mean, not a full meal, but anything that will elicit an insulin response. You're telling the body 8 times, store, store, store. When you're telling the body to store, 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 you cannot tell the body to burn, 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 because it's never a two-way street at any given time. So if you eat 8 times a day, you're going to tell your body 8 times a day to store. And then no wonder you feel like you're gaining weight. And think about the 50s. In the 50s, the average American ate 2 to 3 times a day. We didn't have obesity problems. There was no culture of exercise. Yet people, from an obesity standpoint, did fine. Today, the average American eats 8 to 10 times. They put something in their mouth 8 to 10 times a day throughout the day that elicits some form of insulin response. Okay, let me give you an analogy. Every adult usually has it has both a checking and a savings account. And most of us do just fine utilizing our checking account on a daily basis, to put money in and take money out. Our paycheck goes in there, we buy food with it, it's a pretty dynamic thing. It's easily accessible, right? And seldom do we ever go to the bank to access our savings account. For that, we would have to do something really drastic, like we would have to make a huge purchase, right? So typically we don't do that. Now the body is the same. The body loves to access the short-term energy, which in comparison is going to be your checking account, right? It loves to access, because it's easy energy access. It loves to manage the hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute energy needs, utilizing your short-term energy stores from your liver and your muscles. But something really drastic, very specific things have to happen for you to access your savings account, for you to access that fat storage, to unlock the fat storage for energy, your fat cells, okay? And very, very specific things to have to happen, which most of us do not focus on, and this is the reason why we are having a hard time when it comes to weight loss. Okay, so every time you eat, again, you release insulin. And so you're having this type of, method of eating. You're eating throughout the day, you're grazing all day long. Okay, you decide you want to lose some weight. So instead of 1,500 calories, you decide to cut your calories by 500, because here's the magic. Pound a week fat loss, because 3,500 calories equals a pound of fat. So if I cut 500 calories a day for a week, I'm going to lose a pound of fat. No, guys, it never does happen that way, because the body is way more complex than that. The body doesn't speak calories. The body doesn't have caloric receptors. Okay, the body speaks the language of hormones, and you cannot simplify the human body down to a mathematical equation. Okay, while caloric deficit is significant when we're losing weight, but you cannot apply a lot of physics solely to think about weight loss. There are a lot of other physiological responses that take place that are complicating the situation. So while yes, calories in, calories out has some significance when it comes to weight loss, we have to consider all the other factors. Watch, for example, like I said, you wanna lose some weight. You're not happy with yourself. You cut 500 calories from your diet, and now the body doesn't know what is going on, right? Again, the body doesn't speak calories. So all it knows is there's not enough energy to fulfill its energy needs. So what does it do in turn? Most of you think that this difference in energy is going to come from your fat cells, but it doesn't. Because what the body will do, it's an immediate response, it's trying to fix the problem, right? So what it'll do is it'll decrease your metabolic rate in an effort to burn less energy, okay, so in order to get through the day, so to make up for the difference in the calories that you're not bringing in. So also it'll release a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is an important hormone that comes from the lining of our stomach. When we are hungry, we release ghrelin, and that signals the hypothalamus, signals the brain that you're hungry and you need to eat. And under normal circumstances, after you eat, ghrelin levels drop completely. Now, scientific studies indicate that whenever you eat in a caloric deficit during a diet, or when you are obese, ghrelin levels never drop. So now you're constantly pushing this hormone out to make you hungry in the effort to stimulate you to eat more to make up the deficit in energy. Nowhere along this line did we talk about going to your long-term fat stores, to your savings account, to unlock that energy store for usage. Doesn't happen that way. That is a very valuable storage that your body is going to try to defend as much as possible, because it doesn't know when food is coming in next. So very specific hormonal changes have to take place in order to access that fat bank, okay? So understand this. Just because you're eating in a caloric deficit, it doesn't mean that magically that deficit is going to automatically come from your fat cells. And this is the reason why most of you throw in the towel when you're dieting, because now you cut your calories, you're not losing fat, you're getting really tired, your metabolic rate goes down, your everyday non-intended activity goes down, you're not fidgeting as much, you're cold, you're hungry, you're miserable, and you throw in the towel. Okay, now you have a lower metabolism, you're eating the same amount because your body's trying to defend your old frame, and now you're gaining weight. So this is the cycle constantly people go through when they're trying to lose weight, okay? So whenever you're eating frequently, however little you're eating, even if you're eating in a caloric deficit, I stress that, okay? Every time you eat and you elicit an insulin response, and if you do that over and over frequently, what the body goes through what's called like an insulin noise. Think about it this way. If your neighbor plays a loud music all the time, you have two choices. You're gonna go over there and ask your neighbor to turn the music down, or you're gonna plug in your ears. That's two choices you have. Same thing with insulin. Your body, you want to try to reduce the insulin levels, but you're not doing it. Your body's trying to do that, but you're constantly bringing in food, however little, but it's constantly creating an insulin spike. And as a result, the insulin level stays high. Now, the only other choice the body has is to basically plug up its insulin receptors. When the insulin receptors become deaf to insulin stimulus, that's when we talk about insulin resistance. And this is the problem that type 2 diabetics have, or pre-diabetics have. Because now you have chronic levels of insulin that are high. And what is the role of insulin in the body? To store stuff away. Remember, when insulin is present, insulin pushes the body into a storing mode. So if you have chronically elevated insulin in the blood, what are you telling the body? Store, 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 store. Even though you're eating in a caloric deficit, you're just constantly storing. And when you're storing, you cannot be burning. Remember, guys, at the same time, this is never a two-way street. You cannot be doing both at the same time. So see, our ancestors were very, very successful at mastering this technique, not because by choice, but that's just the way it was back then. They went through periods of feast, they went through period of famine. When the picking was slim, they basically ate nothing, but they didn't perish. Humanity survived and we evolved because we have metabolic flexibility. The very reason, because we eat sugar when our food is plentiful, when we are feasting, and then whatever's left over, and after our immediate energy needs are satisfied, we're gonna store it away for later use, for the very time when food is not coming in and we are fasting. But when you're eating frequently, 8 times a day, you're not allowing the body to ever get to that point where it can access that stored fat, because you're constantly introducing insulin in the body. As a result, now you hijacked this very mechanism that worked so very well, and you created hormone sensitivities. And when you create, hormone resistance. So whenever you create this hormone resistance and hormone imbalance, the system fails and it no longer works and you're not successful at losing weight. And this is the very reason why the calorie in, calorie out doesn't work either. It is not a mathematical equation. Remember that. We're not, you cannot just apply physics alone to the human body. There's a lot of physiology involved. And the physiologic responses are a whole lot more important than the actual number of calories we focus on. But we are a society that focuses on that. And we need to shift away. And obviously it's not working. The obesity crisis is huge. And we have more than ever a lot of diet foods available with low calories and no calories, yet it's not working. Okay, so if I piqued your interest, please stay tuned to my next video where I'm going to be explaining to you how to normalize this system to make your weight loss goals successful. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so I can reach more people on the channel, on this platform. And for those of you who are returning, as usual, thank you for tuning in. This is Dr. K, all the way, signing out.